Cam Newton's voice cracked slightly when he defended Shedeur Sanders. You could hear the frustration not just for Sanders, but for every black quarterback who's ever been labeled cocky instead of confident. Newton wasn't just pushing back against Rex Ryan's attack. He was reliving years of coded critiques, unfair expectations, and systemic doubt.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
When Sanders walked into the league with confidence and poise, some saw promise. Others, like Ryan, saw attitude. That double standard is exactly what Newton was tired of. The exchange went beyond just words. It highlighted a cultural fault line in sports media. For Newton, defending Sanders meant confronting a system that consistently second-guesses black athletes for the very qualities that fuel their greatness. The conversation peeled back the media's power in shaping reputations, and how those reputations can either pave the way or block the road entirely. At its core, this moment wasn't just about Cam or Shedeur. It was about refusing to stay silent in the face of unfairness. Cam Newton just reminded everyone why he's one of the most outspoken voices in football, because when things get messy, he doesn't hold back. And this time, the target? Rex Ryan. It all started when Rex Ryan went on air and lobbed some heavy criticism toward Shedeur Sanders. Not about his performance stats, not about his gameplay, but about his body language, his dedication, and, of course, the all-too-familiar question of work ethic. The kind of vague, unprovable critique that's been thrown at black quarterbacks for years. He didn't offer any evidence. He didn't cite any practice reports or insider breakdowns. He just said it. Like his gut feelings about a player's vibe were gospel. Like calling a young black quarterback lazy wasn't laced with a long, ugly history of coded bias. That's when Cam Newton stepped in. Because if there's anyone who understands how dangerous those narratives are, it's Cam. He's been on the receiving end of that exact same scrutiny. Called too flashy, too confident, not focused enough. And now, he was watching the same outdated playbook being pulled out again. This time against Shedeur Sanders. And Cam wasn't having it. He lit into Rex Ryan in a way that was raw, passionate, and deliberate. He called out the fact that there was no factual basis behind the critique, just empty speculation. And then he dug deeper, pointing out how the media always seems to twist confidence in black quarterbacks into arrogance. How a poised, calm presence on the field gets recast as a lack of discipline. How swagger becomes a red flag, but only when it's coming from someone who doesn't fit the NFL's mold of what a leader should look like. That's what turned this from a petty media spat into something much more serious. Because Cam didn't just defend Shedeur. He used the moment to spotlight how systemic bias operates in sports. How it creeps into commentary, into scouting reports, into front office decisions. How it shapes the very opportunities available to players like Sanders. And yes, things got heated. People close to the situation say the argument nearly turned physical. Cam was visibly upset. Rex, reportedly, didn't back down. Voices were raised. It wasn't just an uncomfortable exchange. It was a confrontation that boiled over. And honestly, that explosion wasn't surprising. Because it's hard to keep calm when you're watching someone recycle the same tired, damaging narratives that have held back generations of black athletes. The timing couldn't be more frustrating either. Shedeur Sanders is in the early stages of what many believe could be a stellar NFL career. He's shown poise, mental toughness, composure that exceeds his years. And yet, here comes Rex Ryan implying that his demeanor somehow disqualifies him. What exactly does bad body language even mean in this context? That he doesn't scream at teammates? That he doesn't flail his arms on the sidelines? Because we've seen plenty of white quarterbacks do exactly that and get praised for being passionate. Let's call it what it is. This kind of critique only ever seems to go one way. Cam Newton laid it out plainly. There's a double standard, and it's been operating unchecked for far too long. The kind of narratives that attach themselves to black quarterbacks aren't just inaccurate, they're damaging. They can tank draft stock, shake confidence, and alter the way coaches and general managers perceive a player, regardless of talent. And the kicker? It's never really about football. That's why these criticisms are always vague. Not dedicated. Doesn't study enough. Bad attitude. There's never film. Never stats. Just feelings. Shedeur Sanders, according to Newton, has elite mental traits. He's calm under pressure, focused, grounded. And for quarterbacks, those are crucial qualities. They're what separate a flashy prospect from a long-term starter. But instead of being celebrated for those strengths, Sanders is being nitpicked for things that have nothing to do with how well he plays the game. It's not just unfair, it's sabotage. There are whispers around the league that Shedeur's confidence might be the real reason he hasn't been named a starter yet. Not his skill, not his readiness, but the fact that he doesn't shrink himself to fit the image that makes team executives comfortable. That he's not willing to play along with the unspoken rules. That he acts like he belongs because he does, and that makes certain people uneasy. Cam Newton knows exactly how that feels. He's lived it. And when he saw it happening again, in real time, he made it his mission to shut it down. This isn't about whether Shedeur Sanders will succeed. He will. His resilience is too strong, his talent too obvious. The question is whether the NFL will finally stop getting in its own way when it comes to evaluating black quarterbacks fairly. Because when the same types of commentary keep surfacing, and always toward the same kinds of players, you can't write it off as coincidence. And when a high-profile figure like Cam Newton says, "Enough," it forces people to confront what they've been ignoring. Rex Ryan's remarks weren't just careless. They were a symptom of a larger problem. A culture that's too comfortable relying on perception instead of performance. A media machine that jumps to conclusions based on tone and attitude, not tape and execution. And now, thanks to Cam, the spotlight is back where it belongs. Not on who smiled or frowned during a press conference, but on whether the NFL and those who comment on it are truly ready to move beyond these outdated, racially coded critiques. There's something deeply frustrating about watching a player get picked apart before he's even given a chance to prove himself. That's what's happening to Shedeur Sanders. And the sad part is it's not new. Black athletes are constantly expected to overperform just to get basic recognition. To work twice as hard to be called half as prepared. To endure years of micro-scrutiny and narrative sabotage, and still be expected to smile through it all. Cam Newton's outburst wasn't just about this one moment. It was about the accumulation of years of that nonsense. He knows what it looks like when a narrative is being built to undermine a player. And he knows how dangerous it is when that narrative is allowed to grow unchecked. And that's why this moment matters. Because it's not just about defending Shedeur, it's about dismantling the pattern. About challenging the system that lets people like Rex Ryan go on TV, toss out a lazy opinion, and shape a player's future without accountability. The truth is, Shedeur Sanders has all the tools. He has the skills. He has the mental game. And he has the fire. If anything, his confidence should be seen as an asset, not something to be punished. But until the system learns to see that, players like him will continue to be held to a different standard. Cam Newton saw that, and he said what needed to be said. Let us know what you think. Do you agree with Cam's reaction? Was Rex Ryan out of line? Drop your thoughts in the comments, especially if you're tired of seeing the same tired narratives keep cycling through the league. Hit that like button if you believe in calling out bias when you see it. Subscribe for more no-fluff takes on the biggest stories in sports. And share this video with someone who still thinks body language is more important than stats. Because this conversation, it's not just about one argument. It's about what we allow to pass as analysis, and whether we're finally ready to demand better. The firestorm around Cam Newton and Rex Ryan didn't start in a vacuum. It started in a system that's been broken for a long time. And this moment just cracked it wide open. You have a respected former NFL coach, Rex Ryan, going on record to say Shedeur Sanders might not be as committed as he should be, that his body language isn't right, that there are concerns about his work ethic. And yet, No film breakdowns. No scouting reports. No coaching insights. Just vibes. Just that familiar gut feeling that always seems to show up when a confident young black quarterback doesn't perform humility the way some people expect. It's lazy. It's coded. And it's dangerous. Because this kind of critique is never just a comment. It's a loaded message. And when you put that message on TV, when you broadcast it to millions of people, it becomes a narrative. One that fans buy into. One that executives notice. One that shapes careers before they've even had a chance to begin. Cam Newton knows that. And when Rex Ryan said what he said, Cam saw exactly what was happening. So he stepped in, loudly, forcefully, and unapologetically. Because this wasn't a conversation about mechanics. It wasn't about play style. It was about identity. It was about perception. It was about who gets to be seen as a leader in the NFL. And who has to constantly defend their right to even be in the conversation. Cam Newton said it best. Shedeur Sanders isn't lacking discipline. He's overflowing with composure. He's not soft. He's mentally elite. And he's not lazy. He's strategic. But when those traits show up in a young black quarterback, suddenly they get repackaged as red flags. This is the exact trap that Cam had to navigate his whole career. And that's why this argument almost got physical. Because this isn't just about opinions. It's about real-world consequences. It's about watching talented athletes get denied opportunities, get unfairly benched, or get labeled before they ever get a shot. Because someone like Rex Ryan decided to start a narrative that feels true to him. This isn't exaggeration. This is pattern. It happened with Lamar Jackson, who was told he should switch to wide receiver. It happened with Justin Fields, who was called unprepared before he ever took a professional snap. It happened with Jalen Hurts, who had to prove himself 3 times before anyone admitted he was a franchise QB. And now it's happening with Shedeur Sanders, who's already being accused of not caring enough, just because he doesn't perform fake humility for cameras. It's exhausting. It's insulting. And Cam Newton had every right to be furious. And let's be honest, there's a level of comfort in sports media that allows these narratives to keep recycling unchecked. No one demands receipts. No one asks the tough questions. They just let these takes slide because they've heard them before. It's familiar. It feels normal. And that's the problem. So when Cam pushed back, he wasn't just defending Shedeur. He was attacking the whole system that makes these attacks possible in the first place. He brought the heat. He said what so many people in the league can't say without risking backlash. He stood in front of a machine that spent decades tearing down confident, talented black quarterbacks. And he called it out for exactly what it is, bias. And now the sports world is split. Some people are calling Cam emotional. Others are saying he took it too far. But let's really look at that for a second. Why is it that calling out racial bias is always seen as too much? Why is it that defending yourself, your legacy, and your people is labeled as dramatic, but casually implying a young player is lazy gets treated as acceptable discourse? It's hypocrisy, and it needs to end. Shedeur Sanders hasn't just shown talent. He's shown poise, maturity, and grit. Every quality you'd want in a franchise quarterback. And yet, he's still facing the same scrutiny that's followed players like him for generations. And if that wasn't enough, insiders are hinting that his swagger might be the reason he's not starting yet. Not lack of skill, not lack of preparation, just vibe. Because he's confident. Because he doesn't shrink. Because he doesn't perform obedience for the media or soften his identity to make people comfortable. That's what this whole thing is about. Cam Newton saw the system reaching for the same tired tools, throw some doubt on the work ethic, hint at character flaws, question leadership. And he wasn't going to let it slide. Not again. Not to another young, black quarterback who's doing everything right and still getting the wrong labels. And it's worth asking, how much talent does the league lose because of this? How many careers never take off because of one narrative, one bad take, one coach or executive who didn't feel right about a player? The NFL claims to be a meritocracy. But if that's true, then perception shouldn't outweigh performance. And yet, here we are, again. And this isn't just a football issue. This is a cultural issue, a media issue, an image issue. It's about how confidence is received depending on who's delivering it. Because the truth is, Shedeur Sanders acts no different than plenty of other young athletes. But the reaction to him is very different. As he gets called arrogant, immature, distracted. But if he were someone else, if he looked different, acted differently, he'd be praised as confident, composed, cool under pressure. The only difference? Who's wearing the jersey? And now, thanks to Cam Newton, we're all talking about it. Loudly. Finally. And it's making people uncomfortable, which means it's working. This moment, this whole explosive, heated clash, wasn't about disrespect. It was about demanding respect where it's been unfairly withheld. It was about breaking the cycle. And if a few egos got bruised in the process, so be it. Because at the end of the day, if you're in the business of shaping public perception, you'd better be ready to answer for the narratives you push. So here we are. Cam Newton didn't start this fight, but he made damn sure it wouldn't get swept under the rug. He made it impossible for anyone to pretend like Rex Ryan's comments were just part of the job. Because they're not. They're part of a pattern, a systemic one. And until more people start calling it out with the same energy Cam brought, it's just going to keep happening. But thanks to this moment, that pattern's starting to crack. And Shedeur Sanders? He's still here, still working, still focused, still proving that resilience beats opinion, that facts beat bias, that no matter what the media says, talent eventually forces the truth to the surface. So don't count him out. And don't ever tell Cam Newton to stay quiet. There's something unsettling about how fast a narrative like this takes off. Rex Ryan made one sweeping comment about Shedeur Sanders' so-called lack of dedication and poor body language. And just like that, the doubt machine kicked into gear. The media ran with it. Fans started parroting it. And suddenly, this kid, this highly disciplined, mentally sharp, talented quarterback, was being talked about like he didn't care about the game. Like his future in the league was already up for debate. And for what? Because he didn't scream on the sideline? Because he didn't perform intensity in a way that makes certain coaches and commentators feel comfortable? Because he has swagger? That's the exact coded language that's been used to undercut black athletes for decades. The idea that swagger equals selfishness. That composure equals disinterest. That not yelling means you're not a leader. That's what had Cam Newton ready to throw a chair. He knew this wasn't just some offhand remark. This was an attack on Shedeur Sanders' character, disguised as sports commentary. And the people who've never been on the receiving end of that kind of bias, they might shrug it off. But Cam, he lived it. He's been the guy in the headlines for smiling too much, for dancing in the end zone, for being too loud in interviews. He watched the media dissect his attitude more than his actual gameplay. He watched them turn his confidence into controversy over and over again. So no, he wasn't going to let Rex Ryan do it to someone else. Especially not Shedeur. Because here's what's really going on. Shedeur Sanders is walking into the NFL with more polish, more preparation, and more public pressure than most rookies ever experience. And he's handling it. He's focused. He's smart. He's got the game and the mindset. And that should be enough. But in the eyes of certain critics, it never is. That's why Cam Newton stepped into the line of fire. Not for attention. Not for drama. But because he knew the stakes. When Rex Ryan questioned Shedeur's commitment, he was also sending a message to the league, to executives, to fans, to people who don't watch tape but do consume narratives. And that message was, don't trust this guy. He doesn't act the way we like. And Cam had to shut it down. Because what happens next is what always happens. Those whispers start to follow the player. They show up in scouting reports, in press conferences, in subtle coaching decisions, in anonymous sources saying he's just not quite ready. And then suddenly, Shedeur Sanders isn't starting. Not because he can't do the job, but because a storyline made it harder for anyone to give him a real shot. Cam Newton refused to let that cycle repeat. He called out the media. He called out the bias. He exposed how flimsy the foundation of Rex Ryan's argument really was. No stats, no film, no receipts. Just the same old tired critiques that always seem to land on the backs of black quarterbacks. And the response? Polarized. Some people praised Cam for telling the truth. Others accused him of being too emotional, too defensive, or making it about race. But let's be real, when isn't it? How often do we see white quarterbacks with attitude and ego get labeled as gunslingers or fierce competitors? How often do they get second chances, benefit of the doubt narratives, glowing headlines about their fiery leadership? Now compare that to the way people talk about Shedeur Sanders, or how they talked about Cam Newton, or Jameis Winston, or Teddy Bridgewater, or Lamar Jackson before he made them all eat their words. This isn't about one argument. It's about all of them. It's about a structure that has always demanded black quarterbacks be perfect, polite, and passive to get a fair shot. And even then, sometimes it's not enough. So when Cam's voice cracked with frustration, when his fists clenched, when he nearly came to blows with Rex Ryan on set, it wasn't just anger. It was exhaustion. It was years of seeing talented players get boxed out not because they couldn't play, but because someone didn't like the way they played the game. And Shedeur Sanders? He's doing everything right. He's calm. He's studying. He's leading. He's preparing. And through it all, he's staying quietly confident, which should be a strength. But in this system, that gets twisted into something else. And the worst part? He's not even surprised. Because he's Deion Sanders' son. He knows how this works. He's been raised in it. That's why he's so composed. That's why he doesn't react to the noise. But that doesn't make the noise any less dangerous. And Cam Newton knew that if someone didn't speak up now, that noise would become the story. So now we're here, in the middle of a public showdown between two former NFL giants, one trying to keep the old rules intact, the other trying to break them down once and for all. And honestly, it needed to happen. Because these moments are uncomfortable, yes. But they're also necessary. They expose the cracks. They force conversations that can't be ignored. They pull the curtain back on how bias gets baked into analysis, how perception shapes opportunity, and how some players are forced to fight narratives that have nothing to do with the actual game. Cam Newton didn't overreact. He responded with the urgency this situation demanded. Because the NFL doesn't need more opinions. It needs accountability. And it's time the people who shape the conversation, former coaches, media pundits, fans, start thinking critically about why they believe what they believe. And who it hurts. So where do you stand? Do you think Cam was right to call it out? Should Rex Ryan be held accountable for the kind of commentary that creates real-world consequences for young players? Or do you think this is just part of the game? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Smash that like button if you're tired of seeing confidence get weaponized as a flaw. Hit subscribe if you want more breakdowns that don't play it safe. And share this with someone who still doesn't understand why body language isn't a reason to bench a quarterback. Because the only thing that should matter is talent, not tone. And Shedeur Sanders? He's got plenty of that.